Supreme Court Justice Malcolm Everett winced as Officer Brad Connolly slammed him against the side of his black Mercedes, the cold steel of the handcuffs digging deep into his wrists. "You uppity old black man driving a car like this. Who'd you steal it from?" Connolly sneered, his knee pressing hard into the 72-year-old jurist's back. Onlookers filmed the scene with horror as Justice Everett, still in the tailored suit he'd worn to a university commencement address, was dragged across the pavement. The glint of his Princeton cufflinks was dulled by the grime of the roadside. Everett chose silence over indignation. He didn't reveal who he was. No proclamations of status, no judicial thunder. This was not about ego. It was about bearing witness. In a moment that would set fire to national headlines, he allowed the system to show itself unvarnished and unfiltered. What began as a traffic stop would evolve into a national reckoning that shook the very scaffolding of the American justice system. He had driven this route countless times, the road between his past and his present. This time, he was on his way home from delivering a speech to aspiring law graduates. Detouring through Brookdale, the town where he'd grown up under Jim Crow laws and unspoken rules. He drove slowly past the landmarks of his childhood, the courthouse where his father once mopped floors, the diner that denied his family service, the rusting bus stop where he'd first dared to dream of becoming a lawyer. The flashing lights behind him appeared as he rolled past the town's old library. A police cruiser followed, its presence lingering like a shadow. Officer Connolly, recently promoted to police chief despite internal concerns about his behavior, saw the luxury car with DC plates and decided it didn't belong. In his eyes, the elderly black man behind the wheel was out of place. He needed to be checked. Everett pulled over calmly, placed his hands visibly on the steering wheel, and waited. When Connolly approached, the conversation was clipped. "License and registration." "Certainly," Officer Everett replied, his voice calm. "My license is in my wallet. The registration is in the glove compartment." He narrated each motion, decades of experience guiding him like muscle memory. Still, Connolly's sneer only deepened. "Malcolm Everett, huh? And I'm supposed to believe this is your car?" "It is. Purchased in full 3 years ago." "From DC, are you? What brings you to Brookdale?" "I grew up here. Just revisiting the neighborhood." "Step out of the car." "Now." Everett knew where this was going. He complied. What followed was a scene seared into the conscience of a nation. Rough handling. Racial slurs. A knee in his back. Cuffed too tight. A crowd gathering, horrified and helpless. An old man humiliated on the street. The officer never paused to ask himself why the man he was arresting maintained such composure. Why his speech was precise. Why his presence carried weight. Everett spent the next hours in a small-town holding cell. No water. No phone call. No medication. Just time and the stale stench of institutional apathy. Officer Connolly refused all inquiries. Even when a young officer, Brian Mercado, began to suspect something was amiss, he was silenced. Connolly wasn't just confident, he was cocksure, emboldened by a system that had protected him before. Meanwhile, the outside world began to stir. A woman named Grace filmed the arrest. Her video, posted to social media, spread like wildfire. Hashtags exploded. Networks interrupted broadcasts. But it wasn't until Everett's daughter, Naomi Everett, a prominent civil rights attorney, saw the footage that the situation accelerated. Naomi immediately alerted the Supreme Court. Security teams scrambled. Calls were made. And still, Everett sat, waiting. When the truth broke, Brookdale Police Station erupted in chaos. Mayor Ellen Parker stormed in, waving a federal ID. Officers scattered. Connolly stood stubborn, insisting the ID was fake. "This is Justice Malcolm Everett of the United States Supreme Court," Parker shouted. "You've assaulted and detained one of the most respected jurists in the country." But Everett, being Everett, refused to lash out. Even as the cuffs came off and paramedics rushed in, he looked Officer Connolly in the eye and said, "Only the law should protect all, not just the powerful." The fallout was seismic. Connolly was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Naomi filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. The video evidence was damning. But what began as an individual case revealed something: dark-era network of organized obstruction. Extremist affiliations. Leaked documents. Political collusion. Everett became more than a man wronged. He became a symbol. Not because of what was done to him, but because of what he chose to do next. He testified. He called for reform. He remained on the bench. And when the Supreme Court heard Daniels v. Chicago PD, the most consequential challenge to qualified immunity in a generation, Everett delivered the majority opinion. He wrote, "We are not the guardians of comfort but of the Constitution. If the law fears review, it ceases to be justice." In Brookdale, the town that once told young Malcolm Everett to drink from a separate fountain, a civic plaza now bears his name. And in courtrooms across America, his legacy endures not in bitterness but in balance. Not in vengeance but in vision. Because sometimes the most powerful statement a man can make is silence, until he chooses to speak. The next chapter of Malcolm Everett's impact came not in a courtroom but across communities grappling with the implications of his arrest. Civil rights groups mobilized with new urgency. Law schools added case studies about Everett's experience. The Department of Justice launched a nationwide review of small-town law enforcement agencies, beginning with Brookdale. Naomi Everett, drawing from her father's courage, established the Everett Institute for Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal representation for victims of police misconduct. The institute also trained local lawyers to challenge wrongful arrests and racial profiling cases, shifting power back to communities long overlooked. Meanwhile, Officer Brad Connolly faced not only federal charges but increasing pressure from within his own network of supporters. Allegations emerged about his links to extremist online forums and a secretive police union faction that tracked the political leanings of city officials and judges. Public opinion split. Connolly became a figurehead for those claiming policing was under attack, but leaked recordings painted a different picture. In one, Connolly laughed with fellow officers about stopping those people in nice neighborhoods. In another, he described Everett as just another loudmouth with a robe. These revelations hardened resolve across the country. Reform bills that had stalled for years began moving again. Cities debated qualified immunity reforms. Police departments across the Midwest invited Everett and Naomi to advise on training standards. But Everett remained deliberate. He declined television interviews. He rejected profiles. His only public comment after the Daniels ruling came in a short op-ed. Justice does not come from louder microphones or bigger headlines. It comes from persistence, from pushing systems that do not want to be pushed, and from standing firm when standing is hardest. Still, threats continued. Naomi received death threats. The Everett Institute faced bomb threats. Social media campaigns accused them of hating police. And then, just as the chaos peaked, a letter arrived at the Supreme Court addressed to Justice Everett. Handwritten in blue ink. "I was wrong. I judged you by your face, not your truth. I thought power belonged to a uniform, but you showed me it lives in dignity. I'm sorry." It was unsigned. But Everett folded it carefully and placed it beside the Constitution on his bookshelf. Because that too was part of justice, the possibility of change. And so the work continued. Quietly. Relentlessly. Unshakably. In the name of all those who could not speak, but who, through him, would finally be heard.